Finley to throw. Over the middle, intercepted. Wolford again. Wolford the other way at the 30, the 40. Wolford to midfield. Miles Wolford with the pick. The Heels on the doorstep of an enormous victory. Williams is the running back next to Howe. Play action. Howe will now lob it down the near side. Newsom with a man all over him. Pins the ball against the back of the defender and brings it in. Heels can get a first down at the 3. Now, one fake to the right. Now he's going to run to the left. Howe at the 5. Takes the shot. Pinballing off the chains for the touchdown. Sam Howe showing the toughness for 6.
Cardinals down 4, 35-31. May has the shotgun snap. Pressure coming. Rolls to the right.
Goes to the end zone. Touchdown! Touchdown, Antoine Green! 16 seconds to go. No flag.
Snapping it off the 8-yard line. May pulls it, tries to roll it apart.
Now he's going to throw it and score! Christian May throws it to Paytor in the end zone for the touchdown! They are going to play left-handed. Was walking out on the run and threw it left-handed. Bernard fields it at the 26. Heading in with Barton. Theo at the 35. Theo, he's at the 50. No, he's not. Yes, he is. Theo, he's going to take it for a touchdown. Are you kidding me?
What's going on, guys? Welcome into another edition of the Heel Tough Blog Podcast. It's your host, Anthony Pagnotta, here with you guys as always. Tonight, we dive into the loss to the Duke Blue Devils. A day later than normal, but with everything that was going on last night due to work and everything like that, we had to push it off. And so we are here tonight to dive into that loss to Duke, what it ultimately means for Carolina. And, you know, we look at the overall picture of this season and talk about whether or not this season is a failure. Because, you know, we said coming into the year that really the biggest goal out of everything was to make a bowl game for Carolina. Our expectations were a little bit higher than that. Certainly in the preseason, it got to that point. But I do think that one of the lines of demarcation for us to declare that this season was a success or a failure was Carolina making a bowl game. It seems like, look, Carolina still has a slight chance to be able to make a bowl game. But even if they do, they're going to make it as a 5-7 team. And would we still deem that a failure? We'll talk about that here on this edition of the podcast. Got a couple of commitments that Carolina rolled in today that I'll tell you about in the closing notes. So make sure you stick around for that. And a guy that was a part of this program earlier this year that has entered the transfer portal. In case you guys missed that, I'll tell you about that and tell you a little more about the article that we have on the website at the end of the show. But as I mentioned, we're talking Carolina Duke here in this one. And Carolina falls 32-25 to the Duke Blue Devils. Had a 25-24 lead in the fourth quarter against Duke. But unfortunately, the final 2 drives of this game, offensively, not great for Carolina. And that's ultimately what does them in. And I think let's start there. Let's start with the final 2 offensive drives for Carolina, where they possessed the ball, failed to pick up a first down. It was 7 plays combined. They go 3 and out, then they eventually go 4 and out for what ends the game. But they were sacked 3 times in those final 2 drives, including twice on the second to last drive, where it felt like they had a real chance to put this game away. And I think that's the most frustrating part from that perspective. And you could blame the offensive line all you want. Offensive line was only credited with allowing 1 sack. So according to Pro Football Focus, they believe that Gio Lopez held on to the ball a little bit too long, stayed in the pocket a little bit too long, and took a couple of unnecessary sacks there towards the end of the game. So, I mean, when you view that, I look back at this game and I think, we'll talk about some of the other missed opportunities that Carolina had, but I really think that second to last offensive drive where Carolina gets the ball up 25-24 and has a chance to go down the field and really put the game away, I think that was really the moment where Carolina ultimately lost the game because they weren't able to do anything there. They eventually let up the touchdown, and then they don't have any sort of counter on that final offensive drive.
Yeah, and you take a look at when you get that fourth down stop. If you believe in momentum, if you believe in Uncle Mo, it's on Carolina's side. Keenan was as loud in that moment as it had been since the TCU game. And I've been at every home game, so I can tell you that I'm not exaggerating that. Like, the place was loud, it was enthusiastic. And I think at that point in time, they believed that Carolina was going to win. It was when I started to believe that Carolina was going to win the game. But when you go 3 and out as quickly as Carolina did, I looked right at you and said, it's probably going to come back to bite us. It's probably going to come back to cost us. And it did. I think you got to give Carolina's defense credit for forcing another fourth down, where, of course, that was where the fake field goal came into play. But like Carolina's defense, for as much as they couldn't get off the field in certain situations, kind of kept Carolina afloat while the offense was trying to find it all game long. But good teams put games away at home. Bowl eligible teams put games away at home. And you look at Carolina, that's something that they failed to do down the stretch here. You go back to the Virginia game. That was a game that Carolina could have won different times in regulation and overtime, failed to do so. You look at this Duke game. The same can be said about that. And, the offensive line, you can say that PFF puts more of the onus on Gio Lopez for the sacks. Part of it, I do think that it was the worst opportune time. Carolina's receivers struggled to get open. Regardless, those lapses in communication, those lapses in execution just can't happen because that was winning time. And Carolina just failed to do what they needed to do to emerge victorious. And I think what was really frustrating was, for Gio Lopez, maybe the best game he played all year. I thought he fought his ass off, standing in the pocket and making throws while under duress.
Mm-hmm.
I thought the defense, for as much as they couldn't make plays, I thought they did a really good job keeping Carolina in it and giving them a chance to win, because Darian Mintzow's really freaking good. And you had to learn that the hard way on Saturday afternoon. But you also committed 7 penalties in the final 7.5 minutes of the ball game. Like, half of the penalties that they committed happened in the final half of a quarter. Like, it was just a complete meltdown. I think what I tweeted out was the final 7.5 minutes was a masterclass of how to not win a game, of how to not close a game out. And for as much progress that they made, as far as they came after the second bye week, some of the losses down the stretch did show that this was still a team that never learned how to win, and that was certainly on display on Saturday afternoon in Kenan Stadium.
Yeah, I mean, the lack of discipline was stunning, because this is what we were sold on when you made the hire of Bill Belichick, was that all of this stuff was going to disappear. And for the most part this year, it has. But you get into one of the more crucial games of the season with your back against the wall, and it's a complete meltdown. Now, I think some of the unsportsmanlike conduct penalties were a bit iffy. I thought there was a quick trigger with some of them, but at the same time, it's on Carolina to make sure that those flags aren't getting thrown, especially in a game that's as hotly contested as that one is. There were some that were legitimate from Carolina, and even if they don't end up taking 12 in the game, let's say 2 or 3 of them were questionable and those end up going Carolina's way, it still doesn't matter. You still would have taken 9-10 penalties in this game when you were one of the more disciplined teams in the ACC coming in, going up against a team that was as undisciplined as any team in the league. I mean, this was a team that, coming in was averaging around 8 penalties per game. The penalty yardage, they were one of the worst in the entire country. And, in this game, it's just a complete 180. And, Duke ends up committing just 3 penalties for 27 yards. Carolina, 12 penalties for 103 yards. And you mentioned 7 of them come within the final 7 minutes of the game. So you handed all the momentum over to Duke with the penalties that you were taking. And some of these were just penalties that were, the mistakes are just something that cannot happen. Illegal substitution penalties. Carolina has a couple of them early in the game. Those are just things that can't be happening for Carolina. So those, they don't end up hurting you nearly as much as some of the ones later in the game. But those were things that we were sold on wouldn't be a problem under Bill Belichick. They crop up. You have a big play on offense that has to come back due to what was basically an illegal formation because Carolina didn't line up the way that they were supposed to, but it was that Jordan Owens didn't report as eligible for Carolina because of the way that he lined up. So, I think it's moments like that really leave you frustrated as a Carolina fan because you thought that with Bill Belichick in place, a lot of this stuff, which were issues that we saw under Mac Brown, would be cleaned up. And this game showed you that this is still a team that when it comes to clutch time and when it comes to the games that really matter, this team is ultimately going to turn into an undisciplined unit.
And it's usually what you see in year one of a coach that's rebuilding a program, that's trying to establish the culture. But this is a different circumstance because this isn't a normal first-year head coach. It's his first year coaching at the collegiate level, but you're talking about an 8-time Super Bowl champion, and the hallmark of all of his championship teams were disciplined. And for the most part, Carolina was disciplined for the majority of the year, but when they needed to show poise, show self-control, in the biggest moment so far with everything on the line, a rivalry win, a trophy, and your bowl eligibility hopes, it wasn't there. And I believe at the college level, you coach discipline more than you do so at the pro level. And I know these guys are being paid now, but they're not being paid as much as you get paid at the pro level. And it just, I think it just was just a reflection of just some of the inconsistencies we saw from this coaching staff at different points in time this season. And that's why I think we saw the level of execution really fluctuate as the season moved along. Jordan Shipp said in his post game that he was surprised that there wasn't a fight during the game and that he expects there to be a fight next Saturday against NC State. We all want to see our guys fight in the sense of playing hard, competing through the whistle, so on and so forth. We don't literally mean that in the fullest extent. And it kind of just felt like Duke knew that they could bait us, and at some point we were just going to pop. Mm-hmm. Like there was just a season's worth of frustrations that at some point they felt like we were going to uncork out on them. And that's effectively what happened. And it played a role in why Carolina didn't win. It didn't cost Carolina the game, but it played a role in why Carolina was not able to win because, when you're talking about all those personal fouls, there's 15 yards. And what have we talked about all year? Carolina's margin for error just isn't what it's been in years past. Like, you've got to play as close to perfect as possible. And, they did that at certain times on Saturday, but it wasn't a complete 60 minutes. And against a team that was as gifted as Duke, that was motivated to keep the victory bell, that was motivated to beat Bill Belichick, that was motivated to, reach bowl eligibility, you had to do that more consistently than what they did. And that's not what happened. And it's ultimately the biggest reason why Carolina fell short on Saturday afternoon.
Yeah. You go back to, a couple of other penalties that really mattered. in this game. You know, they had a pass interference penalty that was questionable on Thaddeus Dixon, but that certainly played a big role. How about the roughing the kicker moment from Marcus Allen? That was one that, you know, ends up, working out in the favor of Duke after he ends up, Polino ends up missing the field goal attempt. That results in a touchdown for Duke. And that was a killer for Carolina as well. That's where the frustration lies with this team, is that, you know, even when they made mistakes, they weren't able to make up for it. I mean, you had the unsportsmanlike conducts, 3, all of them on the defensive side of the ball too. So it wasn't even the offensive guys. It was all on the defensive side of the football where Carolina was making mistakes. And that's what's infuriating for this group, is that it seems like that was the area that brought Carolina down. You mentioned it. There were some things that the defense was doing to help this group out and keep them around, but the penalties were the one area where they were really bringing Carolina down throughout the entire night. Not only were they struggling to defend the run, which we'll talk about here in just a second, but yeah, those penalties were huge. And so it's for this game against NC State that's coming up. You mentioned the quote from Jordan Shipp. I mean, yeah, dude, we want to see, when we talk about seeing fight out of you guys on the field, it's about, playing to the whistle. It's about showing that level of toughness, that level of physicality that you need at the point of attack. We don't need you taking penalties after the play, and we don't need a fight in the game against NC State. I mean, look, I hate NC State as much as anybody. Don't get me wrong, but the fight is definitely not what you need. That's not going to lead to success for Carolina in this game. It's just going to lead to more penalty issues, and probably going to be a big part of why Carolina would be unable to beat NC State if that is going to be the case. One other area that they have to clean up is really their inability to get off of the field on important downs. You know, it wasn't really third down for Duke. Duke was 6 of 15 on third downs. And don't get it wrong. There were a couple of big third down conversions in there out of Duke as well. But it was fourth down. That was really the down where Carolina was unable to get off the field. You mentioned it. They have the one stop on fourth down that gets them the ball back with a chance to drive down the field, take maybe a 2-possession lead if they would have gone for 2 again, but at least take an 8-point lead in the game. And Carolina was unable to do it. That was their one fourth down stop. Every other time that Duke went for it on fourth down, and we knew coming into the game they were going to be aggressive. One of the most aggressive teams in the entire country in terms of going for it on fourth down. And they showed you that on Saturday. They went for it 6 times. 5 of those get converted, including the fake field goal that gets them all the way down to the 1-yard line, eventually leads to the touchdown score for Carolina or for Duke that eventually allows them to win the game. For Carolina, I think, that one wasn't nearly as bad. I really thought that was just a great play call from Duke. That was something that in that moment, Carolina just, could not have really seen coming, because you were just pretty much putting it on the leg of Todd Polino, a guy who had missed from similar range. It was a 44-yard field goal that they were attempting. As I mentioned earlier, missed from 46 yards. But, it ended up working out for Duke because Marcus Allen ran into the kicker. They were hoping that he would just miss the field goal. Did not even come to their mind that they would run a fake field goal. So that's a great call from Manny Diaz in that moment. But earlier on the drive, 4th and 7, Carolina can't get off the field. Earlier in the game, a 4th and 6, Carolina can't get off the field. It's those types of downs, and we've seen this throughout the year in some of these games, especially down the stretch here in games that have been close. When Carolina's needed to get off the field in crucial downs, they haven't been able to do it, and unfortunately, that was a massive problem for them on Saturday against the Blue Devils.
Yeah, you mentioned the 2 fourth downs that, or 4th and 6, 4th and 7, 6, 7. I think it's fair to expect your defense to get off the field in those situations. You take it one step further. You gave up a 3rd and 13 in the ball game, a 3rd and 16 in the ball game as well. Those are downs that, quite simply, you have to win. And I think we've gotten to a point with this defense you expected to win because of the way you could generate a pass rush. And, with what Steven Belichick was doing, I think with his ability to disguise coverage, but also bring a blitz or two that Duke or that the opponent could never really prepare for. And it just felt like on those crucial downs, whether it was, Melcar Bouchide, Tyler Thompson, whoever it was, even if they got an initial rush at Mensa, they couldn't make the play. And it was like once he, got out of the pocket, there was just no answer for him from Carolina. And we told you going into the game that, hey, look, he's Sunday good. I'm not saying he's Sunday starter good. He's going to play in the National Football League in some capacity. And it felt like on those 2 4th downs and those 2 3rd downs, he showed you why. And he showed you why Duke paid him $8 million to come play quarterback for him, as opposed to staying down at the group of 5 level. But it just really comes back to the margin of error for this group. And those conversions were just backbreaking. When you look at the 4th downs, look at the field position that you could have gotten that you lost. I mean, that would have been, the 4th and 6. It was maybe just over our side of the 50-yard line. When they went for it on the fake field goal, it was just outside our 30-yard line. If Carolina gets off the field there, guess what? You don't got to drive the full length of the field to go get points. And we know this offense is not capable of doing so. So it comes back to complementary football. And there were glimpses of it during the game, and it's why they were able to come back and take the lead. But it just wasn't there the way that it had been there during the previous handful of games. And until Carolina gets that corrected, that's going to be, I think, the challenge for Bill Belichick and his coaching staff in year 2. I think it'll be fair to expect, or at least see, the same kind of uneven play that we saw at different times this year during Bill Belichick's first year on the sidelines in Chapel Hill.
Yeah, I mean, you look 3rd down. You mentioned 2 of the conversions, 3 conversions of 3rd and 9 or longer for Duke in this game. So, I mean, they just, whenever they needed to make plays in these 3rd and long situations, these 4th and long situations, that's an area that Carolina has to figure out moving forward, is how can they get off the field in these situations? What type of guys need to be on the field to be able to make these plays? And, a big part of it was, if you look on the defensive side of the ball, really think it was another quiet day for the defensive line group. I thought this group was silenced for most of the afternoon. They had 18 quarterback pressures, which is solid, nothing unbelievable. But the thing is that turned into just 1 sack and just 5 tackles for loss in the entire game for Carolina. I thought, not only in the passing game, I did not think they did enough to get to Darian Mensah. Even though he only threw for 175 yards in this game, they actually did a pretty decent job of limiting him when he needed to make plays. In this football game, he was able to, because Carolina couldn't get pressure on the crucial downs. And then, you look at what they did in the run game again. I mean, the interior of this defensive line, we were bragging on them for most of the middle part of the season about how good this group had been. Really, since that game against Central Florida, Carolina had done a really good job in the middle of the defensive line of winning. Well, the last 2 weeks, that has not been the case. They got worn out by Wake Forest on the interior. And then in this game, it was really all over the board. There were, a couple of runs on the inside, especially when Anderson Castle was in the game. That was a guy that Carolina had absolutely no answer for. But Nate Shepard was getting some success, not only inside the tackles, but then right off that right edge, he had a lot of success in that area as well. So Carolina's defensive line, which had really been playing very well, in this game, I felt more disappointed because Wake Forest offensive line has been having a pretty solid year. They're a pretty solid group, one of the better ones in the ACC. This Duke offensive line was not one of the better ones in the ACC. They were a team that came in really struggling to protect their quarterback, and Carolina was never really able to take advantage of it in this game.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. When you get 18 pressures on a quarterback, I think it's fair to expect you to convert that into more than just one sack. A part of that is Mensa, even though he doesn't run a lot, there is like a mobile factor where I think he just does a really good job getting out of the pocket and making some, off-platform throws. But with that being said, that this became the strength of Carolina's defense. This had been the calling card for what had really fueled their second half surge, was a defensive side of the football without their best corner, winning up front, winning often, getting to the quarterback, recording a ton of sacks, and then winning in the run game. And it just felt like they could not get Mensa to the ground when they got him in a muddy pocket.
Mm-hmm.
And then when it felt like whenever Duke needed to run the ball, they got whatever yardage it was they were looking for. And it was just as demoralizing as it was the week before against Wake Forest. I don't know if that's just a sign of a group that's, finally wore down, because we've talked about how undersized they were, and how they really battled through that. I don't know, but I don't think I was prepared to see that. I thought they were going to bounce back in a real big way on Saturday. And I don't know what I was expecting in terms of sack total. I don't know what I was expecting in terms of being able to limit Duke in the run game. I just thought I thought Carolina would be better. I thought Carolina would be able to, I'm not going to say wear down Duke's offensive line, but do a much better job, making game-changing plays against them. And what was with the whole, we're going to put Melcar Abushide in pass coverage for the majority of the first half? Like, I get you gotta do things different, because by 11 games, these teams got to beat on who you are on film. But like, for me, there was never a reason for him to be in coverage. He is not a pass. I don't think he possesses that ability. I want him hand in the dirt, standing up on the edge of the defense, go get the quarterback. I want him crashing down that line to make a play in the run game. And it felt like Steven Belichick kind of got a little too cute, but Duke was able to pick up on that. And there were a couple of times where he got matched up on a running back or someone crossing the middle of the field that, quite simply, he just can't keep up with. And that's just the reality of the situation. But those plays would end up, those would be the difference in a 3rd and 9 all of a sudden became a 3rd and 2, or a 2nd and 8 goes to 3rd and 1. And so I thought that was also, I also thought that was disappointing as well. So I'll be interested to see what they look like on Saturday, because they're going to have to bring their best game they've played here in a month to give Carolina a chance. But for as well as they played during the 4 games after the second bye week, their limitations came to the forefront in the last 2 games, and it's a big reason why this defense wasn't able to make the plays to help give Carolina a chance to win.
Yeah, I think honestly, it shows you that there still is another level that this group has to go in terms of physicality. I think that, some of the body types that you have in there, you mentioned that you think that, this Carolina team's still a little small. I know that was one thing that some people mentioned before the season about this group. And yeah, maybe they do end up having to get bigger in there, but I think the big part of it is that Carolina just isn't physical enough at times against some of these better opponents that they're facing. I mean, yeah, against Wake Forest, we saw that lack of physicality on the interior of the offensive line really crop up, because that's where Damon Claiborne and those guys were able to have success. In this game, I thought it was more the edge rushers. You saw those guys really getting manhandled at times. And so that's the goal for Carolina this offseason, is when you go out, when you find these guys in the transfer portal, when you find these guys at the high school level, you're looking for guys that fit more body style to what you need on the interior of that defensive line. You need these big-bodied guys that can really take up two gaps and cover a lot of space. That's what you're hoping for. And so when you've gone out and gotten guys like Trayshawn Ruffin in this class, you're trying to get Bodney Cleveland to flip over in this class. That's where you're hoping that you're going to get those body styles from. And then some of those other guys that you find in the transfer portal. Carolina's looking at some edge rushers in the transfer portal already. Well, one of the things that I think they're going to have to do is find someone that's got a little bit of weight on them, but that's a little bit more effective than, let's say, a Smith Vilbert. That's something that I think you've got to find, because I think, Milcart, for the most part, through that middle portion of the season, was finding success against weaker offensive lines. He was really taking advantage of that. And look, those stats count, man. That's the one thing that I want to lay out there. Just because he isn't dominating in these games doesn't mean that he isn't a good pass rusher or that he can't develop into an even better pass rusher next season. It's going to be more about consistency for him. We've seen this before from certain Carolina pass rushers. One that comes to mind almost immediately when I think about it, a guy I was very critical of during his time in Chapel Hill, but a guy that, ends up finishing with a pretty decent amount of sacks because, there were times where he would just have these big games. Tamon Fox. That's who Milcart really reminds me of a little bit. And Tamon Fox was a really good player, man. But in order to be an elite level player, to be a pass rusher that, really can take Carolina to the next level, you've got to be able to win in these big games. So I think that's going to be interesting. This group's going to get one more shot at it. This is your chance to really prove against an NC State group that is always physical on the offensive line. Even if they come into this game struggling along the offensive line, which I got to be honest with you, I haven't began prep for NC State, so I couldn't tell you just yet whether or not NC State is having a great year on that offensive line or not. They're going to bring physicality to this game because they always do. They're always locked in for this matchup. So you've got to be able to do the same. Carolina still with one more chance to be able to prove that. We'll see whether or not they're able to do that on Saturday in Raleigh against the NC State Wolfpack. All right, heading back over to the offensive side of the ball. Oh, really quickly, did want to talk about some of the missed opportunities that Carolina had in this game. We talked earlier about some of the opportunities that Carolina had to get off the field on fourth downs. Well, there were opportunities for Carolina to officially seal this game. A couple on the defensive side of the ball, and then one not to seal the game, but to keep the game going on the offensive side of the ball. Thad Dixon, has the ball go through his hands. Speaking of that 4th and 7 conversion that we were talking about earlier, crops up yet again here. This on that final scoring drive, a chance to get off the field on 4th down and 7. And Thad Dixon, has a chance to make a play on the football, and the ball just goes through his hands. That's, again, one of those plays where bad teams have those things happen to them. Good teams find a way to come up with that interception in that moment and win the game. Greg Smith, the second, has a chance dropping back into coverage. Now, this one was a much harder play. I think Thad Dixon was the one where it kind of left you maybe a little frustrated after the game, feeling like he's got to come up with that, especially with the type of corner that he is. Or, some people said just from watching some of the replays on television that if he just goes to knock the ball down, that Carolina probably gets out of there with a win. Instead, he tries to catch the ball that goes right through his hands, and it ends up in the hands of the Duke wide receiver. For Greg Smith, he had a diving attempt on the ground to try to come up with the ball. That one was a little bit tougher, but yet again, that's one of those breaks that a good team probably gets and a bad team just isn't getting in a season like this. Then you get to the Kobe Pesor moment where he has a chance to haul in a ball on 4th down for Carolina. One of the few deep throws that we've seen from Gio Lopez this season that was pretty much on target, and Pesor drops it on the final offensive drive. It leads to Duke taking over the football and eventually kneeling the game out. That could have kept the drive alive. Now, does that mean that Carolina drives down the field and eventually ties the game? Who knows? But that was a scenario that you had where once again it ends up as a missed opportunity for Carolina. So I think that's one of the other big things that you could take away from this game was that Carolina had their chances to close this thing out, but like bad teams do, they weren't able to do it.
Yeah, it was just another indication of just how thin the margin is. And for Carolina, those 50-50 plays, if they go Carolina's way, they probably win the game. If they don't go their way, they're probably going to lose the game. And some of those plays were tough to be, were tough. But, when you're trying to win a game against a rival to keep your bowl hopes alive, you got to make those plays. And I think was probably the message, when they were reviewed the film. It's just that those are the plays that are the difference between winning and losing the game. And I think it was evident that every time Carolina had one of those moments that they didn't take advantage of, it felt like Duke was able to capitalize off of them. And that's the sign of a well-coached team against, I'm not going to say a poorly coached team, but a team that still has some ways to go under their head coach. You look at the Kobe Paysour stuff, disappointing, man. Like, those are plays that you expect him to make. And when he doesn't make them, like in the moment, you feel sorry for him, but you also, hey, we're paying you to make that play. Go make the play. And I think, as much as a learning experience as Saturday Cannon will be, you hate when your learning experience has cost you a game against your rival, and it cost a chance for this program to get to a bowl game, which is something where, we're used to being in because Mac Brown never missed a bowl. But that's going to be the reality of the situation for Carolina, barring something, unforeseen. So, yeah, some of those plays were tough, but those are making tough plays and not is the difference between winning and losing. Carolina simply wasn't tough enough to make them. And it was just another domino as to why they fell short against, their second biggest rival in football. And that's why they dropped their second straight rivalry game dating back to the loss to Wake Forest 2 weeks ago.
All right, let's go over to the offensive side of the ball. Let's talk about Gio Lopez, because I think this is one of the games where Tar Heel fans, I still saw some Tar Heel fans that were giving him the blame for this game. And I think a lot of it, again, goes back to those final two drives. I think there are a lot of people that believe that he should have been able to make certain plays. But, I mean, this was the best game that we've probably seen him play for Carolina. 21 of 27, 204 yards, a touchdown, no interceptions. I mean, look, the touchdown number is not going to blow you away. 9 carries, 20 yards, and a touchdown. But I felt like, one, the game plan was probably built for him more than any other game plan that we've seen this season. There were a decent amount of designed runs that were in there for him. Those designed runs were relatively successful for Carolina, and it just felt like he was playing a little bit freer. And then when you were able to use his legs early in the game, I think that really settled him into the game. We had said this. This was something that we talked about early in the season. Can you do this, Freddie Kitchens? Can we at least try it? Because maybe this allows your quarterback to get to a space that he hasn't been this season, which is fully comfortable with playing in the pocket. And I think that's what you saw in this game because, against the blitz, I mean, Duke blitzed 22 times in this game. 22 of the dropbacks he was blitzed on, and he was 15 of 17 against the blitz, and it included him picking up 11 first downs. So I thought he was amazing at times in this game in terms of some of the plays that he can make. Amazing for Gio Lopez doesn't mean that he was amazing in terms of looking like some of the other quarterbacks that we'll be looking at in the transfer portal. But I thought for him, for all the limitations that we had talked about for him, I really thought that he looked really, really good in this game. And he's one that I left the stadium on Saturday, and I said to myself, This one was not on Gio Lopez, and I still feel like there were other people that disagreed with that thought.
Yeah, because that's the lazy narrative, because in sports talk and podcasting, when you lose in football, you blame the quarterback. And look, there's no denying that the majority of the losses that Carolina has endured under his starts, he was a big factor as to why Carolina got beat. Was not the case at all. You could argue he was the reason why Carolina was in the game. They struggled to run the ball once again. After the way they were able to run it the first handful of games after a bye, you got behind, and you got put in a position where you had to throw it, which meant Duke was going to blitz, and I thought he just stood in that pocket as well as he had all year long and made throws. And you're right, they did a lot of things that I have been begging and kicking and screaming for them to do. They started calling designed runs because they realized, dude, 4 yards is a win. Like, if we call this design run and it gets us from 1st and 10 to 2nd and 6, that's a win. And I thought he had up until the final 2 drives, I thought he had a good feel in the pocket. I thought he knew when to get out. I thought he knew when to slide up and make a throw, or maybe to slide up and pull it, and try to extend the plays with his legs. And you look at some of the hits he took because of the running. He was probably as physically beaten up as he's been at any point so far this season, and he kept getting up and making play after play, throw after throw, and gave Carolina a chance. I thought them playing with a little bit of pace helped him. Carolina was finally getting on the ball with 25, 26, 27 seconds. And I said all summer, or all during the year, I don't care if you maximize the play clock, but just get up on the ball and just allow him to have more time to see a defense and look at the information and make an adjustment or two at the line of scrimmage, so on and so forth. You saw that at different times, and it felt like whenever Carolina played fast, their offense was able to move the football up and down the field and get the points they got to put themselves in position to win the game. So, look, I've been as critical of Gio Lopez, I think, as anyone that has a platform that covers Carolina football. And I'm not going to walk away from that criticism. But if you were at that game, if you watched that game, and you thought he was the reason why Carolina didn't come out with a win, you need to go back and really reevaluate how you watch a game, because he was as big a reason why as any Carolina had a chance to win the game when they took that 25-24 lead in the midway part of the fourth quarter.
Yeah, it's like I said, I really believe, especially, going up against the Duke defense, which was better than the defense that Carolina saw in the game against Syracuse. It's better than the defense that they saw in the game against Stanford. I really do believe this was the best game that we saw from him. I thought, being able to deal with the blitz the way that he did allowed him to, put together one of the better games that you could have possibly hoped for in this one. Again, a lot of it was the short passing game. You're relying on guys to be able to make plays, but that's just what you are with Gio Lopez. You're a short and intermediate passing team that occasionally will be able to have some shots down the field that that are going to be there. And in this game, I thought there wasn't a moment that I said to myself, man, he missed a throw there, needs to have that throw. That was the first game all season where I sat there and did not say that to myself that I can remember. And, whether it's in the stadium or at home, it feels like there was every game you were looking at 2 or 3 plays that you would say to yourself, yep, wish we had that throwback. Didn't feel like that the other day. And so, yeah, is he the guy that needs to be the starting quarterback for this team next year? No, nobody's saying that. Let's make that clear. But at the same time, if he performs well in these games down the stretch of the season, it's okay to admit that he's actually playing good football, but that he might not be the right fit for Carolina moving forward, ultimately to take them to where they want to go. And I think that's the point that you're going to reach. They're going to need to go out. They're going to need to find a starting quarterback in this transfer portal class, because you're not going to rely on him next year. You're not going to rely on the true freshman. Travis Burgess that's coming off an ACL injury. You're not going to rely on the redshirt freshman that didn't see more than, anything other than garbage time snaps this year in the case of Arturi Newkirk. You need to go out and get a guy. But Gio Lopez played his ass off in this game, and he deserves to be praised for that. One other thing that I wanted to say about the offensive side of the ball, I think Jordan Shipp showed you why he is so valuable for this team and why he is really one of the guys that Carolina needs to lock in on and make sure that they keep him in place for this upcoming season, for the 2026 season. 8 catches, 83 yards, a touchdown in this game. I mean, look, is he blowing you away with the numbers that he's putting up? No. But again, you're doing it with a quarterback that is limited. And I still think if he was in a different offense, there were some people that have brought this up in one of the group chats that we're in that said that he would be an All-American caliber player. I don't know if I'm going that far. I think that might be a little much. But what I will say is I think he could be an all-conference caliber wide receiver. I think that is certainly on the table for him. I think he's a guy who could get to 1,000 yards receiving and could have double-digit touchdowns. We talked about that at the start of the season. You saw on Saturday what type of receiver he is, especially when he has the touchdown grab followed by the 2-point conversion play that he has. That is the best version of Jordan Shipp. That's the guy that you brought here to Carolina and that you think can be the number one receiver. And I think that is what you're hoping for next season. So to me, you talk about guys needing to really show you that they deserve to be on this roster next season. I think that's the stage that we're at this point in the year, and especially going into that game against NC State. That's going to be a big prove-it game for a lot of guys. To me, there's no need to prove it for Jordan Shipp. I don't care what anybody says. There have been some people who have been critical of him, that we work with that say he doesn't create enough separation or whatever. Dude, I've seen enough from him that I think he has what it takes to be the number one receiver for this team next year. And it's the reason why I think Carolina needs to do everything possible to keep him in place.
Yeah, they need to be prepared to offer him whatever he wants, whatever the market demands, and it's probably going to demand, I don't know, maybe $1.5, $2 million. I don't know, but you better be ready to pony up, because you look at it from the production standpoint, and that's obviously the most important thing. And yeah, he's playing with a limited quarterback. He's also playing for a limited play caller that I still don't think knows how to get the most out of his talent, out of his skill set. And he still put up okay-ish numbers to where he's going to be a welcome commodity if he goes into the transfer portal. There will be power conference programs that are throwing big bucks at him. There will be playoff programs, I think, that'd be interesting in adding him to your roster. And then you just look at the emotional toll or the emotional leadership, where he, as much as any guy on the offensive side of the ball, as much as any guy on the entire roster, plays with an emotion that, permeates throughout the offense, permeates throughout the guy standing on the sidelines, and permeates throughout the crowd. Whenever he gets fired up, the crowd kind of seems to respond to his emotion, because he loves being a Tar Heel, and he's loved being a part of this university and this football program. So did he have the season we thought he was going to have? No. But this was not the offense that I thought Carolina was going to even try to run, let alone this is what the offense was going to look like. And so I'm a Jordan Shipp fan. I'll be Shipp for life. And I hope Carolina is ready to do whatever they need to do to keep him, in Chapel Hill, because with some of the guys that are set to depart the program, if you miss him, guess what? You've got to go get QB1, wide receiver 1 in the portal. I'd feel a lot better about, how the success QB1 could have if I know Jordan Shipp's back on this roster for 2026.
Yeah, there's no question, because, the thing is who knows if you can go in there and find somebody that's going to be better than Jordan Shipp, that's going to be willing to play for what is going to be an unknown offense. Whether they, unless they go out and hire just some huge name that is very well known. I know there are people that are already clamoring for Chip Kelly to be the offensive play caller for Carolina. I don't know if there are connections there between him and Belichick. I can promise you, based off of some of the stuff that we have seen in recent years from Chip Kelly, it's probably not what you're ultimately wanting. But unless they're able to go out and get a big name, similar to that, I don't know if people know exactly what this offense is going to look like. So it's going to be hard to convince somebody to come and play for that offense unless you bring in a big-time quarterback. And I know Carolina is going to go big quarterback hunting. That doesn't mean that you come out with the quarterback that you ultimately want. So you need to be careful. You need to make sure that you prioritize the guys that really matter. And in terms of where I'd have them with priorities, I think he's right near the top. If not the top guy on the roster that you need to keep. I know Milcart's going to be up there. That's certainly another guy that I think is very important that you keep on this roster. I think Jaden Patterson, very important that you keep him on this roster at corner. Kamori House, certainly going to be a big name at linebacker that you want to keep in the fold for Carolina. And then, that the running back spot, I think you want to keep Damon June. But I don't know if there's anybody that's nearly as important as Jordan Shipp is for this roster for next year. So I certainly think that's something that Carolina hopefully is talking about right now. Hopefully Michael Lombardi is making sure that he's getting together the money that he needs to keep his top wide receiver here and make sure that he keeps one of his veteran leaders in the locker room. Even though Jordan Shipp is only a sophomore this year, he is already one of those veteran leaders for Carolina. All right, now we get to the ultimate question that this podcast has been working up to, because after the game and in the article that you guys can read on the website in the Duke recap, from my takeaways from the game, I put in there that this season is a failure, that after the loss to Duke, Carolina now 4-7 on the year. They are going to finish the regular season below 500. They will finish the season below 500. Wouldn't even matter if they do end up getting to a bowl game. The best record that Carolina can finish with is 6-7. And I think in the first season under Bill Belichick, it is considered a failure, because you're talking about the greatest coach in the history of the sport of football coming in here and not even being able to make it to 500. We thought that with his coaching prowess, with the hires that he made, throughout this staff and the guys that he was able to bring in, that he would find a way to at least make a bowl game, that he would find a way to at least make it to 500. And that has not happened. That was the floor that a lot of us set to begin the season. And we said, if you don't reach that, then this season is considered a failure. So I'm sticking to that. And I believe that after this game against Duke, this season can already be considered a failure for Bill Belichick. You look back on the season that Carolina has had, and I mean, it certainly has been a little bit of a roller coaster, but for the most part, I mean, Carolina hasn't done anything significant. Their biggest win of the season has come against Stanford, a team who is not going to a bowl game this year, just like Carolina is. It's a 4-7 football team, guys. The other wins come against a Syracuse team that is one of the worst teams in power conference football right now without quarterback Steve Angeli. You've got a win over a Charlotte team that might be the worst team in FBS football because they have just one win on the season. Their only win came against a Monmouth team, which they had to win in a shootout 42-35 over. And then you have a win over FCS Richmond. So to me, I think you can look at this season, and even if Carolina wins the game on Saturday against NC State, I still feel like you can come away feeling like this season was a failure and that we should have expected more from Bill Belichick in year one, even if our expectations for him to make it to 8-9 wins, like we said in the preseason, might have been a little over the top.
when you look at some of the factors that lead to that conclusion, Carolina, a losing record, at home. Your only wins at home this year came against, correct me if I'm wrong, it was Richmond and it was Stanford. Those are the only two games you got at home in Keenan this year, and you had 6 home games. So you have a losing record at home. You're going to get swept by the state of North Carolina more than likely. You've already lost to Wake Forest. You just lost to Duke, and it's really hard to envision a scenario that Carolina is able to beat NC State next Saturday in Carter Finley. That's another nail in the coffin when say, hey, we got rid of Mac Brown because we were tired of underachieving, tired of losing to NC State, and that that still has a chance to be corrected. But the way we're feeling right now, it's really hard to see that coming to fruition. So, some of the layups that if Carolina's 4-2 at home, and let's say the best they could be is 6-6, or the worst they're doing is 6-6, then we're still talking about them not reaching our expectation. But I came on here after TCU and reevaluated. I still thought that was a bowl team. I still thought they were capable of going to a bowl game after getting, Shalama banned by TCU back on Labor Day night. That was not the case. So I don't know on a scale of like 1 to 10 how much of a failure I would rank it. But yeah, there were certain wins that were there for him to have that could have turned the doubters into believers and could have really gotten the hype train from the national media ready to go for year 2, kind of like what Dion was able to do at Colorado. But that just simply did not happen. And so with that in mind, yeah, I do think, and I don't think he would run from it. I think he would tell you that they failed. He'll tell you they came a long way from fall camp, but they still failed because all the goals that they set out before the season started, they're not going to achieve any of them.
Yeah, I mean, I would hope that he would be willing to admit that. I mean, this season was one that, coming in, I think even their expectations were that things were going to be better. And the other part of it is how they sold the program in the offseason. You sold us on this was the 33rd NFL team. You sold us on this team was going to practice better than anybody else. That all the fundamentals about, just do your job, all that kind of stuff with Bill Belichick was going to be the case. The other thing that you sold us on was that when the season started, all of the off the field stuff was going to be out of the way. And that did not happen. You remember earlier in the season, the reason that we got to the point that we got mid-season was because of all the stuff that was going on off the field, all of the storylines that were still going on. And those storylines are still there, guys. It does not matter any day that you open up social media, and you can blame the media all you want. But part of this is on the sideshow that is Jordan Hudson, that just continues to give these websites content because she does not know how to be in the background. And so that's the disappointing part ultimately, is that this season has not been anything that we thought it was going to be. The fact that they've gotten better as the season has gone along, well, yeah, that's great. But you got to remember, nobody expected Carolina to be where they were early on in the year. No one thought this team was going to be as bad as they were, where they were non-competitive in games against power conference competition. And we're talking about, as I predicted, a Central Florida team that turned out to be pretty bad. That was not a team that Carolina should have been struggling that way against, because, I mean, you look at it, they're a team that certainly has not been burning anything down. I mean, they're 5-6. They've got a chance to go to a bowl game. They will not, because they play BYU. But, I mean, their wins outside of Carolina, their wins are Jacksonville State, North Carolina A&T, Oklahoma State, who, of course, fired their coach midseason and was a disaster, and West Virginia, who wasn't that far off from being a disaster. I mean, damn, dude, that's hard to swallow. That TCU team that looks so good on opening night, yeah, that's a team that's not even going to finish the season ranked. So that tells you where they are. They're not a horrible team, but they certainly aren't a team that should be beating you the way that they did. And then that Clemson team that walked in there and absolutely smacked you earlier in the season. Yeah, that's a Clemson team that is going to a bowl game, but is having one of their most down years in recent memory. And there's a lot of uproar still going on around that program as to what they should actually do moving forward. So, I mean, this Carolina team has shown improvement as the year has gone along. This is a team that almost beat a team that could win the ACC championship when it's all said and done in the Virginia Cavaliers. But at the same time, you should have never been in that spot that they were in. And so that's why I get it. I get that some people are wanting to remain positive and still believe that this can happen. And look, there's a chance that it still can. I'm not at the point that I was earlier this season where I'm saying I need Belichick out. I need a fresh start. But I think that it's okay to call this season a failure and we can move on from there. And, ultimately, if you end up winning the game on Saturday, maybe I feel a little bit different. Depends on how you win the game on Saturday too. But I think as we sit here right now, I think you're right. The expectation is that Carolina is probably not going to win that game. And if you finish 4-8, then it's a pretty massive failure for year one of the Bill Belichick era. We'll talk more about that as we go throughout the final week of the regular season, as we get prepared for, hopefully what could be Carolina somehow making their way into a bowl game, really just for the bowl practices. You want Carolina to be able to go if they have the opportunity to go. So hopefully they get a win against NC State this week. We'll be back later in the week to preview that game for you guys. Going to be on Friday for you guys because Thursday going to be devoted all to basketball because we've got Carolina playing Michigan State on Thanksgiving Day. So that'll be an all basketball day for you guys. And then we'll make Friday all about the football team, all about their final game of the regular season against NC State. So make sure that you guys tune in for that edition of the podcast. Meanwhile, for all those that have been waiting, because there have been a couple of people that I think have dipped in here thinking, oh, we're getting basketball talk, right? Well, that's coming up next. So make sure that you stick around for that. We've got the St. Bonaventure recap that is on tap for you guys here tonight. So make sure that you hang around, watch it on these same channels that you're watching this right now for us. And then if you got a little bit of downtime, go over to the website, heeltoughblog.com. I've got an article up there about Jordan Avenger, who Carolina landed earlier today. He is a 3-star prospect out of the state of South Carolina. Really solid prospect that Carolina lands here. A really nice depth addition to this class. Don't think he's a guy that's going to be able to come in, make an immediate impact, but I certainly think that with some of his downhill tendencies, a little bit of physicality that he brings to the table and a nice motor, he's a guy that could have a chance with the right coaching to be successful for Carolina. So make sure you go read a little bit more about him on the website. I break down the film, break down the stats for him. So go check that out if you guys could. Also, Carolina lands Jonah Rodriguez, and a guy who played on the interior of the offensive line at Arizona, eventually transferred down to the JUCO level, played offensive tackle last year, now is hoping to play offensive tackle at this level. So Carolina picks up another commitment there. That I'll have something up for you guys later on tonight. Probably will end up sharing it early tomorrow for you guys to be able to read a little bit about him. But another nice addition for Carolina, another addition at the offensive tackle spot. So Carolina losing, one guy to the transfer portal in William Boone. Go read about that on the website as well. But picking up yet another commitment at the offensive tackle spot in the 2026 class. So that's the thing with the guys that are departing out of the program in the transfer portal. Michael Lombardi said it when he was on the radio show last night. They are wanting to do everything that they can to replace a lot of those guys in the 2026 recruiting class. and then fill their needs in terms of, what you need for to be able to compete next year with the transfer portal when that eventually rolls around. So we're going to have you covered with all of that off-season stuff. Of course, on the basketball side of things, got you covered on everything that's going on the hardwood for you guys. So make sure you head over there, check out that coverage that we got for you. We'll have a recap of the St. Bonaventure game that'll be going up for you guys, and a preview of the game against Michigan State that will go up for you guys as well here in the near future. So make sure you check all that out. But for now, Anthony Pagnotta signing off here for this edition of the podcast. Want to thank Josh for hosting with me. Want to thank you guys for watching and listening. And as always, go Tar Heels.